So if you're following along, you'll notice that InstaMAT, the texturing software that you're looking at in front of you right now, gets its own video. And the reason that is because it came out a couple months after I ended up recording and uploading this course. So I've gone back and made a couple of videos on how to use this application for texturing later on in the course. But I wanted to take this moment here to showcase where you can get the package, how you can use it, how you use it to navigate, so that if you're kind of having trouble following along later in the series, you can come back to this video and quickly get a refresher on how to do all of this stuff. So to start off, where do you get it? So if you come to the link that I will provide, and I'll probably put it on the screen right now as well, you can come on up to get it for free right here. And if we scroll on down to the bottom, you'll see that the license we're looking for is the Pioneer license. And one of the real big benefits that I find of InstaMAT versus other applications like Substance Painter that we use in this course is that it has a great free license. If you make under $100,000 revenue in a year, you are more than able to use this free license for commercial projects, and that's really cool. There are a couple stipulations. It requires attribution and data sharing, so that is something to consider when you are working with this license if InstaMAT does appeal to you. But the trade-off with that is that it is a fully fledged and super competitive software from my experience, and it has none of the functionality withheld in this free version. You have just as much functionality as the rest of the licenses do. So here is the final result of our texturing process in InstaMAT later on in the series, but I want to use it to showcase how we can start to navigate around the software. So the first one you saw me probably just do kind of lightly there was middle mouse to start to pan our 3D view. I can hold down Alt and left click to start to orbit around our model here. I can also use this little gizmo here by left clicking and dragging to do the same. I can even click on these little dots to do kind of like, positional rotations there, snap to specific angles. I'll zoom in and out by scrolling on my middle mouse here. And finally, I can hold down Shift and right click to rotate my HDR environment around, which is really cool. So that's going to be the bulk of navigating around the software here, specifically in the 3D view. On the left-hand side, we do have a couple of other options. So you can see that this one is already enabled by default, which is the material ambient occlusion. So if I click this on and off, you can see I can turn on and off the AO channel for our material. If I go down just two options here, I can turn the environment on and off. And if I go down one more, I can actually choose an environment to light my scene. So I can do something like this here, which completely changes the total lighting scenario in our 3D view. And they all have their own little hotkeys associated if you hover over with the mouse button here. And again, to focus back, say you moved over somewhere and you are trying to rotate and kind of orient yourself back to the model, you can go ahead and hit F to focus your scene, and you'll be taken right back to the model. Now that's the very basics of your 3D viewport. If you come up over here on the left-hand side, you see that we have some viewport settings, such as tone mapping. We can change different types of exposure and camera field of views. We can even go ahead and change the hue, saturation, and lightness. If you're feeling, in the mood for whatever reason, I'm not exactly certain why someone would want to do that, but you have the ability to. So there you go. If we head on down to environment settings again, this is also a different way that you can go and manage the environment. So we can change the lighting scenario for our HDRI here. We can change the opacity. So whereas we had the ability to turn it on and off, we can actually change the opacity with this here, and even the amount of blur if we want more or less. We can also rotate the environment with this slider here, which is pretty self-explanatory, although I think Shift and right click is probably going to be much more useful and versatile for most people. We can also rotate the environment just as like a continuous rotation. And we can also orbit the camera. So again, it's going to do this soft little slow orbit around our model. We can also show a grid in our 3D viewport if we would like to. Just, it might be useful for sizing and scaling things up. We can also show a wireframe over our model, which is really handy. And I think I'm going to turn this orbit off now. There we go. We can even change the color of this wireframe, which is pretty neat. We also have the ability to control the AO intensity here. So just beyond turning it on and off, we can also go and change the intensity. We can control the mesh UV scale. Again, I'm not entirely certain when a scenario you'd want to do this on an unwrapped model, but hey, you can do it. And you're even able to go and create your own, I believe, GLSL shaders and bring them in to InstaMAT here. So if you're pretty tech savvy with shader language, by all means, go ahead and start to get creative with it. Now, the next thing I want to show you is over in our layering project editor. If we come on down to mesh, you can see that we have, the source to the mesh file here, but we also have the mesh format. This is in relation to the normal map, essentially. You can see by default, InstaMAT uses the OpenGL format, which is perfect for applications like Blender, but not Unreal. Unreal uses instead the DirectX. Now you can actually set it to the specific software. Not exactly certain why that is. It might just be an easier way if you're working on Blender or Maya to set it to that and you're not familiar with the mesh format. But when we're working in Unreal, the normal format is actually DirectX. So you'll see when I set that, right, all of that normal information gets flipped because technically, if I get a better light here, actually maybe I'll choose this one. It's going to be flipped around with the green channel for the normal map. So that's something to be aware of if you do need to work in DirectX versus OpenGL. Make sure to set that mesh format here so that your normals are going to display properly. And then when we go ahead and bake, when we are going to bake out our normal tangent space, make sure to set that output tangent to DirectX and bake in the correct format. So if you're having issues displaying normal maps within InstaMAT, chances are it's an issue with the baked tangent space and the mesh format in the layering project settings. So don't worry about that baking dialog too much. We're going to look at that later on in the series, but just be aware that normal format is something to consider when you're working in InstaMAT, just like any other software. And now finally, I'd like to show you how we can also view the different texture channels from our textures onto our model here. So if we come up to our environment settings and down in render mode, we select solo material channel. You can see now we're previewing the base color, and I can go and change it to roughness, our metalness, normal, displacement or height, and so on and so forth. And if you want to go ahead and just reset that, come back up to PBR and we're good to go. Now, chances are you're not going to be doing it that way because there's a much simpler way. Just by hitting the C key on my keyboard, making sure that my focus is in the 3D view. If I hit C, it's going to allow me to cycle through those individual channels, C for channel. And if I hit M, M for material, it's going to bring me back into PBR view. So again, that's just a very quick way to allow you to cycle through and see the different stacks of information on your individual channels, which is pretty important as you're building them up from zero.